I want to first get started with Trey Yingst, chief foreign correspondent on the ground in Tel Aviv, Israel, with more. Trey.
Yeah, Harris, good afternoon. In the hour before the ceasefire went into effect early this morning, the Iranians launched 6 waves of ballistic missiles into this country. It was very intense. We were in a bomb shelter and could hear some of the interceptions overhead as these advanced missile defense systems worked to shoot down the incoming fire. But you can see in this aftermath video, one of those missiles slammed into an apartment building in the southern city of Beersheba, killing at least 4 people. We arrived on the scene early this morning to view the aftermath. Right now, rescue crews are digging through the rubble in the aftermath of this Iranian ballistic missile strike that targeted the southern city of Beersheba. You can see behind me the rubble left behind following this blast that echoed for blocks, destroying businesses, buses, and cars. First responders are still counting the dead, trying to determine exactly how many people were killed. But the side of this building is covered in shrapnel marks, the mamads, the bomb shelters, completely destroyed, showing just how powerful these missiles are when they slam into residential areas.
It was utter destruction. No walls. The ceiling fell down, Anya says. All the furniture is gone. Everything is on the floor. It's like a nightmare.
The Israeli people hoping this will be the last scene of death and destruction they have to face in the 12-day war. This is Fox News is learning new details about how this ceasefire came together at the last minute. A very high-ranking diplomatic source speaking with Fox News says, quote, President Trump spoke with Qatar's emir and informed him the U.S. got Israel to agree to a ceasefire with Iran. The president asked Qatar to help persuade Iran to do the same. Following that, Vice President Vance coordinated with Qatar's prime minister on the details. This source goes on to say this effort proved successful, and following discussions with the Qatari prime minister, the Iranians agreed. The deal was coordinated at the highest level by the president and vice president and the Qatari emir and prime minister directly. Now, there was some concern today that the ceasefire could collapse after the Iranians launched at least 1 missile toward Israel. An Israeli source this morning telling Fox News they planned a strong retaliation, but then President Trump got directly involved, calling Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, telling him to turn the jets around. Ultimately, the Israelis conducted just 1 strike outside of the Iranian capital against an Iranian radar system. This was able to contain the possibility of this spiraling out of control, and as of right now, the ceasefire is holding. Harris?
Trey, before I let you go real quickly, oftentimes we'll be able to see from your video and some of our other correspondents, you know, the immediate reaction to the ceasefire was caught with Netanyahu on the streets, people hailing him a hero, offering him free coffee, so on and so forth. Today is a different day, and I'm curious, are people still as optimistic about a ceasefire? Everybody who's a citizen, I would imagine, would rather have peace. On both sides, actually.
Absolutely. Absolutely, on both sides. The civilian population is paying an incredibly heavy price. And when you look at billboards along Israel's main highway in Tel Aviv, there's a large picture of President Trump, and it says, "Thank you, Mr. President." The people in Israel are breathing a sigh of relief. They've just experienced one of the most intense periods in the history of this country. And now it appears it is over following these efforts by President Trump. Harris?
We have some video of that. We may play at this hour of that huge billboard. Trey Yingst, always great to see you. Great reporting. Thank you. Emily, it is a new day, and it was a bumpy night. So where we stand now, you know, everybody's waiting to see if this is going to hold, but the president was spitting mad at both sides.
And I think what we saw was an interesting illustration of different geopolitical realms viewing ceasefires. And for many in the Middle East, they viewed the spat afterward as sort of typical of the events and moments surrounding a ceasefire, which is, it's a little bit of a gray area for a moment, which I think felt quite shocking to those in the West that aren't used to that, and especially President Trump, that I think takes so much at his word, backed up by actions. I think it was deeply surprising for him that an agreed upon ceasefire would not mean exactly that. Trey Yangst mentioned the civilian population there in Israel, and my sources there have told me that the exhaustion level is quite palpable because as everyone has been sheltering in place in the bomb shelters every night, it's waking their sleep, it's disrupting everything, obviously, and the toll has been tremendous. So we know that while not many have died comparatively, first of all, a life is a life. 24 people were killed, 1,300 injured, and more than 9,000 people displaced. They are living in hotels now at the expense of the government with over 33,000 different apartment buildings that have registered damage. And one of my friends told me about how a missile that hit a neighboring apartment, a projectile flew in and shattered the window of an apartment he owns. The point is, no one is immune from the effects here. But as he said, we remain hopeful that this peace will last.
Well, and that's true for the Iranians, too, because if they are really going to be part of a shift in regime, it isn't us, as the president said. It's going to be on the Iranian people, but you've got to give them the speech, the place for peace. You've got to give them the time to do that. That's what a ceasefire gives. Molly.
You nailed some of the things I was thinking, and I'm looking at this apartment behind Trey Yangst as he's talking about it. We know that a family of 4 was killed in this final rocket barrage that came in before the ceasefire took place. And there is a heartbreaking toll, and particularly with these allies, and so many Israelis are also American citizens. There's a lot of overlap. So we are thinking of them in these final moments and hoping the ceasefire holds, as well as in Iran, where the Iranian leaders have talked about this. And I have some hope that this will hold, because the man who's been doing the vast majority of the speaking, the minister there, talked about how they responded to any attack by the enemy until the very last minute, implying that there has been a last minute. So hopefully this does hold.
I like you. You're really positive.
I'm very optimistic. I am hopeful.
Yes.
I feel like the American public wants to cling to that optimism right now. Obviously, this is being seen as a fragile ceasefire, considering what we've seen in just the past hours. A couple things that I'm watching right now. One is the postponement of this House-Senate briefing on Iran. That was some of the members apparently were pushing for. I'm going back and forth with our own Chad Pergram right now to find out why exactly that was postponed. He's getting some word that members were asking for the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, and the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, to be present for that. We don't know if there was a denial to coming to that briefing or what the exact circumstance is, but we do know that that House-Senate briefing has been postponed. I'm watching that. I'm also watching the market reaction to all of this. You talk about the optimism. We're certainly seeing that play out in the financial markets. I mean, oil's now below $65 a barrel. When President Trump took office, it was above 78. I mean, you've seen a significant decline in prices. And any other time in history, when you'd see this escalation in geopolitical risk, you would see a spike in the energy markets, and you're seeing the complete opposite. So there seems to be a calm in both the equity and the energy markets, and those are globally priced. I mean, it's not just WTI, which is the benchmark here at home. It's those Brent crude prices, which is the lighter, sweeter crude, which is the benchmark for Europe and the Middle East. Those prices are also significantly down, but no doubt everybody today is watching the face of President Trump and that frustration on his face after we had this huge announcement of a ceasefire last night. That is certainly still the headline at this hour.
Well, I don't think he loses the mantle on. He means what he says. Yeah. So when he said no more, they stopped. And we know if he is cussing mad that he has obviously said more to them that we don't know.
Sure.
Right, on a phone call, whatever it took. You mentioned that hearing real quickly. We don't know what's happening yet on the Senate side.
Schumer might be speaking soon. I'm getting some word of that.
So we'll take that live. Want to hear why it would get called off on the House side as well. Paul.
So a couple things. Iran right now has been so degraded. Their command and control is very, very weak. And you see some of that fraying at the edges. I mean, there's the old World War II stories of Japanese soldiers who were on islands who continued to fight for 30 years. OK, now it's not that extreme, of course. But the point is, there is so much fraying at the edges that you have to wonder how really in control they are. And here's where I'm going. Aside from this missile that they fired that Trump seems to be so annoyed by, and it's interesting, he's coming across like a referee that's not being listened to, and I think he's had about enough, and I think they got that message. The head of their Atomic Development Agency came out with a statement and said, well, we're just going to go back to doing it. And if you're sitting where the peacemakers are in Iran who have supposedly agreed to a ceasefire, you got to be saying to yourself, hey, pal, shut up. We've suffered enough. That's not the statement we agreed to, and that's not what we want. To me, that's a real sign of the fact that they're tottering. I'm not talking about regime change. I'm just talking about it's not a unitary country. People think It's as pyramidal as, okay, the Ayatollah runs everything. He's 86 years old. The IRGC is very powerful. You got the Basij. There are a number of different
But they're not
silos.
as powerful as they was because they don't have, as they were rather, they don't have those leaders. I mean, they've taken out everybody. They even took out the guy who was leading it for 4 days. Like nobody was standing. Israel was taking everybody out. But I would echo what the president said because I think this is so important. He said they've been fighting so hard for so long that you know, I won't repeat the F-bomb that he dropped, but I totally get the point. It's like they don't know how to do anything else yet. So that's where the president steps in.
It is like jihadism in certain areas of the world. It's a career path.
Yeah, with a whole lot of lives in the balance. That's what the president's trying to secure now, their safety as well.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.